Welcome to the AVAIL Podcast, where we dig deep and talk about this art we call leadership. My name is Virgil Sierra, your AVAIL Podcast host and lead pastor of Vertical Church, aka Iglesia Vertical in South Florida. Today, we're sitting down with the one and the only Tamra Andress. She is a 7-time #1 best-selling author and marketplace minister. I'm going to add extraordinaire. In this episode, we're going to discuss a couple of her newest books and the topic of servant stewardship. So leaders, lean in and let's get started. Tamra, it's exciting to meet you. I'm excited for our AVAIL audience to lean in and get to know you. How does it feel to be on the AVAIL Podcast?
Oh my gosh, I feel like a fire just got lit inside me by that introduction. I'm like, let's go. I'm ready to lean in too. I know I'll learn just as much as I am to teach. So thank you for having me.
Love it. Love it. We love meeting new friends. We love connecting with people who are influencing and leading effectively wherever God has placed them. And I know that's the truth about you, Tamra. I'm excited for our AVAIL audience to get to know you. Can you share a little bit, before we jump into the meat of the conversation, share a little bit about who is Tamra Andress?
Yes, sir. I am a born and raised beach baby. I live in Virginia Beach, Virginia, alongside my other beach babies. My husband of 13 years, we've been together for 17, and my son who's 11 and my daughter who's 10, who all of us are actually entrepreneurs in some sense. My kids have already had businesses and have turned profits on those. And both of us, my husband and I, run 2 separate businesses and a nonprofit together. So we are, I would say the word busy, but that's a cuss word in our house, one alongside the other 4 letter words, and we like to use the word intentional. We believe that the Lord was intentional, and while many probably saw that he was busy moving and going and had events all the time and speaking engagements all the time, he did it with such intentionality, and so it blesses us to be able to do so. We have been walking with the Lord for nearly a decade, and doing so sold out for Jesus in all forms of our business, in the way we show up to parent and be a friend and be the ecclesia here in our local community and to the nations abroad.
Love it, love it, love it. I love it, I love it. Let's keep talking. Tamra, you one of the books that's more recent is Joyful, like joy-full entrepreneurship. This is part of a 3-book series. Can you tell us a little bit about this series? Tell us a little bit about this book, Joyful Entrepreneurship. And again, you just laid down, you're a family of entrepreneurs, even your 10 and 11-year-old, which I love that idea. You could share about that as well. But talk to us about why joyful entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I was really bit by the entrepreneurial bug when I was little by my mom, who kept a really clean house, but the bug just kept because she had multiple businesses and so did her mom. So it was a generational pass. One of the good ones. There was many others that might not be so good. Who's the chain breakers in the house? I am one.
Yes.
And in the midst of that, I went right from business school into owning my own businesses. I actually started 9 different businesses in my 20s, 2 of which actually took root. One was a brick and mortar maternity and infant boutique here locally, and then the other was a global nursing bra plan that was with the Australian market, Canadian, and the UK. And to do those things while being very young and not connected to the Lord and having 2 kids under the age of 2, you could imagine why I don't like the word busy and why it's a trauma point for me, because I was living for the world's expectations and standards and achievements, and I was not living in the integrity that Christ would have me. And so I had a radical encounter with Jesus at 29 in my living room, and he completely transformed my life. And every time I close my eyes and share that testimony, I can literally see his face and feel and sense his presence, because the 3 things he told me was that you are fully seen, you are fully known, and my favorite part is I still love you. Because in the middle of our mess, when we're seen, known, and still loved, man, you know that's a reckless kind of love. And so moving forward, all I wanted to do was serve him, and I knew that he would use my gifts and talents for his kingdom expansion. And when I laid that down at his feet and I got really raw and real with what am I passionate about, what does the world need, and how can I serve through my gifts and talents, I started my business. And so to give him the reins to the kingdom business strategy has changed my life in a really big way. And so I wanted other joyful entrepreneurs, obviously joy is a fruit of the Spirit, to be able to teach other people, how did you do what you did? What was required of you to get there? And what does leadership look like? We're speaking leadership here, and leadership is very different from what I was groomed to understand leadership as versus what it is to be a disciple.
I love that. I love that. Now you mentioned something in your journey, which basically is there was a season of your life where you were running a business or running businesses and doing that apart from God, right?
Yes.
AD, right?
Yes.
And then now it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
What are the ramifications that you've observed or that you've been able to kind of realize from your experience of being an entrepreneur, of running a business apart from God or without God in your life?
How long we had? How long are we going to be here?
We're on the clock. We're on the clock.
The list literally is eternal. I'll say that. Ultimately, it was things like burnout. It was overwhelm. Like I said, lack of integrity. It was burning relationships instead of building bridges for the kingdom. It was being so focused on money. And yes, as an entrepreneur, there's bottom lines and there's strategy and systems and things like that. But all my line of sight was focused on everything but the Lord, right?
Wow.
So even as a customer service industry where I loved people, that was the one thing I knew I had in common with my pre-season and my post-Jesus encounter was like, Lord, search me and know me. And what is it that I am passionate about? And the thing I was passionate about was people. And that was a non-negotiable for me. And so how do I serve people well? And that's where that concept of servant stewardship really came into play versus leadership for me.
I love that. And I love that because honestly, the good thing about God's grace is when it reaches us, now it becomes a trajectory changing thing for our families, right? And I can't help but think about that 10 and 11-year-old, with that dose of Jesus in their life, and what a difference that makes, to not having. And speaking of entrepreneurs, which is kind of your world, it's been your world for such a long time. A lot of times, maybe entrepreneurs kind of get stuck in the journey. How do you help entrepreneurs get unstuck when they're feeling stuck? And is there a connection there to the joy concept, the joy aspect?
100%. I think the biggest thing that we hear, and I was actually on my own podcast yesterday talking with someone about this, another business coach, and that's really what the roots and heart of our business is business coaching and turning messages into movements, is people have testimonies. All of us do of some sort, and a lot of people want to serve out of their testimony, and they just don't know how. So the number one thing they ask is about clarity. How do I get clear? How do I know what exactly I'm supposed to do? Or they're in the midst of it and they just feel like they're hitting a roadblock. And while prayer and petition and presenting ourselves in thanksgiving to the Lord is fundamental to our walk as Christian entrepreneurs, we also have to recognize that clarity comes in action. And therefore, to get out there, to actually have that time with the Lord, God, He knows, He's already ahead of you. And so creating an opportunity and a time that is intentional, like I said, asking the Lord, help me, and asking Him what His will is, instead of these business systems and bogged down expressions of like the shiny light syndrome of, well, this person's doing this and this person's doing this way. And so when I help with business strategy, I'm not teaching people, hey, follow what I did. I'm like, hey, what does God want you to do? And let's unpack that. And so really understanding people's gifts and their talents and paralleling that to their past, both their pains and their passions, it lines up the most beautiful trajectory. So that's really one of the first activities that we ever do together, is defining those pains and passions and looking at it to a vision of what Christ has already given you.
Did you ever think you were going to be doing what you're doing today? Did you ever think?
Not a chance.
I mean, as you look back, right, Tamra,
I had a microphone since I was little, Virgil. Honestly, I was given a microphone when I was in elementary school for a student broadcasting in my school. I was on TED, like little TED Talk, TV talks for kids. So the microphone doesn't surprise me. The eloquence of the way that I can produce words is something that has been a practice, but also something I've always loved to do from a poetic writing perspective. But the type of way that I serve and the fact that I am in unity with Jesus, no, I never got to know Him, or I never let Him know me fully. I never unveiled myself to Christ. And when I did, I knew that I wanted nothing apart from Him, because I'd experienced it, and it wasn't a taste and see that it was good. It was a taste and see this is really bad.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. I ask this question a lot because I think it's a valuable question, and it causes you to look back a little. It's a little personal, but it causes you to look back. If if you could right now, Tamra, if you could right now have a 1.5, 2 hour coffee with the younger Tamra who's just about to really embark on her journey, like for real, and just an entrepreneurship, knowing what you know now, and and experiencing what you've experienced. What would that conversation look like? And by the way, there are a lot of young Tamras out there, but they might have different names. They might be men and women, young or older, that might need to hear this right now.
Yeah. The first thing I would say is slow down. I think we race into the future, and it's kind of that American dream rat wheel expectation cycle that we get on. Even when my kids were really little and they're like 5 and 6 years old, and people are like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'm like, stop, like plug their ears and don't ask them that. Can they just be who they are right now and that be enough? And so not to be so futuristic, even as a visionary, and learn how to remain present with who you are and what God is doing in your life right now. And then since I was definitely a lukewarm Christian, so when I say I had a radical encounter, it wasn't that I didn't know that God existed. And I would have said, if you asked me, are you Christian? 100%, I would have said I'm Christian.
Yeah.
It was a Saul Paul transformation for me. And so that I would have looked to her in the sockets of her soul and say, hold on to the hem of his garment. Because if you can get that close, then everything else will be okay. And entrepreneurship can be wildly difficult, very isolating, very high, low, emotional, and it doesn't have to be. So that's why I'm such an advocate for this joy component. Joy is a steadfast element. And it is something that only exists when we abide, because and the coolest part, it's not about us. Like, people might see me and be like, you're so joyful, but my joy isn't for me. It's to pass to those that get to experience the Christ in me. And so it's not about you, little Tamra. It's not about you. It's about Jesus.
I love it. I'm a joy guy. I love joy. I love joy. I love joyful people. I love bringing joy. I have a friend who tells me, Verge, you always bring the joy. And I'm like, I like that. Thank you for saying that. I want to bring the joy. And I think it's a fruit of the Spirit as well. So I think there's something beautiful about God joy, right? Not kind of worldly happiness or temporary.
Totally agree.
So speaking of this, kind of shifting gears a little bit to before Jesus, right? You have a book that you authored, Before She Knew Jesus. Can you unpack a little bit the heart behind that and that whole writing collaboration?
Yeah, so it's with a cohort of 15 other women, and the concept isn't the before, like the pre-Jesus Tamra and the post-Jesus Tamra. It's actually the knowingness is really the word we want people to focus on, and it's the process of sanctification. It's leaning into these raw and redemptive stories of who Jesus is and who we are as imitators of Christ. And sanctification can be a big, churchy word, but ultimately every single woman defined sanctification through their experience inside of the book, and share their testimonies of, they could be following Jesus and walking with him for a decade, for 2 decades, for 3 decades. There's so much wisdom. There's some PKs in the book, as you are yourself, Virgil. And there's pivotal moments of pruning that happen in our walk with the Lord. I'm being pruned right now. Every season we get pruned in some way, if we allow him to, and if we're willing to. And so to walk through this pruning process, to walk through this getting to know Jesus, and ultimately becoming like Christ. And so for people to be able to realize that I was one, many lukewarm Christians that have not surrendered their hearts or their homes or their businesses or their families to Christ. This is an invitational book to say there's more in Jesus than you could possibly ask, hope, or imagine, but it requires another layer of surrender. Not just surrender, I love Jesus, I'm baptized. There's more there for you.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's a lifelong expression. Thank goodness he gives us life, because I surely wasn't perfect in the moment of salvation. He saw me in that perfection, but he saw me in Christ, not me as Tamra. He saw Christ in me. And so I'm excited for people to become more like Christ, because the church hasn't always been, and still isn't always, the best example of that. And so it's less about the four walls of the church and more about the following the way of Christ in every realm of life, which is why I love marketplace ministry so much.
Love it. Love it. Love it. You know, there's so many, I can think of so many stories, you know, of people. Can you share maybe, I'm thinking as a pastor, people that I know, right? And stories in my life, stories of people that I know, but I guess as you're sharing that, right? Yeah. Can you share, there's a distinguishing, and you've alluded to this, between being a Christian and truly experiencing Jesus, right? Knowing Jesus, right? Like really experiencing. Can you share a little bit about, in your journey, Tamra, what and how did things shift in the aspect of, yes, I'm a Christian, of, oh wait, I'm beginning to know and be known and experience Jesus?
Yeah, and I give one example generally all the time, which was that radical encounter moment. But I want to give one that's more recent, one because it's raw and in my heart, and it's also something that I wrote about in the Before She Knew Jesus element in this book that's coming. And the process specifically around idolization. And so I'm a Christian, I'm walking it out, I'm going to church, multiple times a week. My kids have been baptized. I have a nonprofit that celebrates Jesus. All these different things are happening in my life where from the outside looking in, you're like, man, she is a quote unquote good Christian. But like I said, God wants more of me. He wants all of me, not just portions of me. And I had the revelation earlier last year that I was falsely idolizing my husband as the provider and the provision of my life, rather than Christ as provider and provision. And we had a big falling out and understanding finances and all of these different portions of our life. And in that moment, I'm like, I trusted you. And yes, I want you to trust your husband, but there is a level of trust that supersedes your earthly relationships. And if you aren't looking to Christ as your comforter, as your provider, as your provisionary, you're going to be disappointed by man every single day. And not to say that you're not still, even when I came to this revolution, I can still get disappointed, but I don't carry the same spirit of offense. I know the power of forgiveness and unforgiveness, unforgiveness being an enemy's tactic. Just that, I think people recognize, if you can think about idolization and what are the things that you idolize. One thing, Virgil, that's like so commonplace now is people idolizing sports over family, over Christ. People idolizing even like the normalization of alcohol. And I'm not anti-spirits, but it's a portion of that, just saying that it's anti-spirits. I am anti-enemy spirits, and there are so many that are let in by these open doors that we have normalized as a society. And so those are the types of things, as I get to know Jesus and I become more like him, just as he flipped over tables, I am going to flip over the tables that are idols in my life, that are things that God presents to me in the sweet Holy Spirit conviction moments that are in the secret place. Not all of those are public things. This is the first time I'm even sharing that story publicly. But I just want people to hear and go deeper to see what it is that's keeping you separated from God. And I didn't think anything was awry. I thought I'm honoring and respecting my husband as the provider and the keeper of my home. And I'm respecting him and doing the love and respect, model that is taught to all of us. And yet I falsely idled that role, and I was putting so much pressure on him rather than putting the stakes in God's court, who is the one who calls us that. So ultimately understanding that sanctification is getting to know Jesus, the character of Christ, and then actually believing and trusting that that's really who he is. Not just reading it and be like, oh yeah, God is good. But do you really believe God is good? Yeah. There's so many facets to who he is. And I love that every single season I get to know him in a new way, just as much as I allow him to know me more.
Love it. I love that. I think this is a great conversation to be having in a leadership atmosphere, because again, as Christian leaders, we need to think about these things. We need to talk about these things. I want to do one last gear shift in this conversation. which has been valuable already. But I want to talk a little bit about the concept of servant stewardship,
Yeah.
which by the way, I don't know that you would hear that in a like normal in the world business,
Yeah.
event or,
Yeah.
or leadership thing, servant stewardship. Can you unpack that concept for us a
Yeah.
bit?
Yeah, I'll give you a vision of me being one of the only women in a room full of about 100 men at a Colorado Business Chamber event, which was a Christian event. They had invited me to speak. I brought all the joy, as you can imagine, and the sparkle. And I open up this concept. And it ended up after a 45-minute share with all of these men on their knees in a surrendered posture, some of which who are weeping, understanding that leadership is not what it has made itself become. It's so much more about stewardship. So people even say servant leadership, but stewardship is what God has already given you. Leadership sometimes can leave us in a place of running after those things that are before us and then being like, oh yeah, I'm leading people, I'm supposed to turn around and bring them with me. But we become our own idol in that often as a leader, and calling yourself a leader even. There's a lot of weight and responsibility to that. And when I think of myself as a steward, and God being my leader, Jesus being my leader, I'm taking that heavy burden, that heavy yoke, and I'm saying, God, you're on the hook for this one. You led me here. And so I'm just here as your servant. I'm just here as the steward of the gifts and the talents and the treasures that you've given me for such a time as this. And I think that it changes the posture of our positions and our titles, and it changes the posture of our heart, because that's what we're focused on, is him rather than focused on ourselves.
Yeah, I think a lot of times on the journey of leadership specifically, and I mean, entrepreneurship is involved there, and leadership in ministry. I think there's this natural tendency to feel or to think, oh, I'm the leader. It's what's most important is that I'm shining, and that I'm the one, I'm doing things because I'm the leader. But I don't know if that's the position or the model that we see even in Jesus as we read the Gospels. This concept of servant stewardship can seem counterintuitive to the leadership world, but it seems to me like the most effective leaders do carry it.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, they'll say that, the best leaders lead from the back. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I'm not sure. I understand the concept of it, but oftentimes when you hear of Jesus, he's either walking alongside someone, or he is leading the pack to a location that he's going, or he's actually having them go and he's staying where he needs to be in that moment. But he's often up front. Is this concept of I just say it this way: just call me the janitor. Literally, I get to be on stages and I have microphones and my name's on books and things like that. But when I'm sitting with my team and we're having a conversation, my most intimate people in my life know that I'll be the first person to pick up the toilet brush. And that's because it's not about me having a clean toilet. It's about them experiencing a clean toilet. And I literally do this every single retreat that I have, every single event where I'm bringing people in. I get on my hands and knees and I clean the toilet. And I don't mean this figuratively, I mean this literally, people, because it's a humbling practice for us to understand that the people in which we as leaders employ, the people that we are bringing alongside us, that they have such an investment and their own stewardship journey that I don't even think we're the shepherds, we're the servants of the shepherd. No matter what hierarchy you put yourself in, we're all invited to the same table. And so I think humility is something that's often missed in leadership. And it's not something that you can really train or teach. It's them seeking Jesus, which creates humility. It's not, hey, if you go pick up the toilet brush, you're now humble. That's not what I mean. It's like you actually having that shift in posture, that shift in heart set, not to show off, but to actually serve. So I hear what you're saying, and I think you're so right that the limelight is often put on this quote unquote leader, but I think the best leaders put the limelight on the people who are alongside them. And Jesus did that with the disciples. He said, you're going to do don't just follow what I do. That's the general model of leadership, right? Do what I
Yeah.
do, not as I say, which is terrible.
Right.
But this like conscious competence training model that puts you in a place of saying, follow me first and watch what I do. And then I'll help you do what I do. And then I'm going to send you off to do what I do. And Jesus said, you're going to do far greater things than me. And in that model alone, I'm like, I want you to succeed far beyond. And that's what I'm instilling in my kids. Like, what you see is a limit right now. There's so much more.
Yeah.
And so letting them imagine and all of those things, but it starts with stewardship for us ever to be able to do that.
Yeah. So I have a 16-year-old boy who's my oldest. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I have a 12-year-old boy.
Right.
And as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, okay, how do you practically speaking model this out for your kids? How do you, because again, in school or with their friends, they're not thinking, oh, I want to be a servant steward,
Yeah.
right? How do you live this out and model it practically for your kids in a way that they get it and would say, I want that too?
Yeah, I'll give a couple of examples. One that first comes to mind is like being a host, right? And when we can put on, whether that's your natural gift or talent, but you are opening your home, which is our sanctuary to other people, to feed them, to commune with them, to have raw and real story time right there in the midst, to pray over them. They get to see that encounter and see how genuine it is, which is not something that I was always exampled. It was more so a show and a mask and a front because we had just fought, an hour before, and now, put on your happy face and make sure you're put together and everything is good. And everything was swept under this massive rug that I still saw in the living room, but for some reason nobody else did. That's not the type of dwelling place that we create. Another one in the concept of stewardship is about their finances. So at a very young age, they already understand the concept of tithing. Another one that is not often taught to littles is the concept of taxes, which are really important for them to comprehend. Taxes are in the Bible, so I have a lot of stories that I can teach them about it. And then also their savings. So it's a 3-tier model, and you only get out of the top of that your spending money out of that. So a lot of people talk about allowance, and that helps them steward it, but I promise you it will burn a hole in their pocket. So we have to teach them, what does it look like to be a steward of our money very early? And then the last one I will give you an example of, Virgil, is our language. I think our language is so critical. One of those ways is, instead of us saying we have to work or we're going to work, I work from my home, so that's one element. My husband has his own facility, is that we are doing 2 different things. I go to create every day. Like, I have creation time today. I'm so excited. I'm going to be upstairs. You're going to hear me, but I need you to stay here and do this. But I'm creating. And his language is, I'm going to help people. And so he's in a service-based industry and he helps. So every day he's like, how many people should I help, Coop? And Coop's like, 13. And he's like, oh, that's a big one. All right, I'm going to do it. So at the end of the day, there's a checks and balances that go along with that. Mama, what did you create today? Who did you talk to Jesus about while you were creating? And then for Dada, it's how many people did you help today? And how many people did you talk to Jesus about today? And that's our types of dinner table conversations. And so I think that it's so multifaceted. There's not one right, perfect answer, but modeling is obviously so critical. They're caught, not taught, right? So everything we do is caught, not taught for our littles. And we try so hard to teach, train, put it inside of their brain. And they're just watching and they are hearing. And that's what they need to learn by.
Yeah, I love that. Those are very practical things to just implement, become natural over time, but it's a practical way of modeling it out for our kids. I love that. Before we share with people how they can connect with you, Tamra, I want to touch one more thing, because I think when it comes to this whole leadership thing, there's another important factor, especially when it comes to the kingdom. You wrote an article in one of our AVAIL journals called "United We Stand: Embracing Collaboration for Kingdom Impact." And I think this is another important thing for leaders to hear, especially. Talk to us about that article.
Gosh, I'm also about to train up my community on this, on collaborations, on partnerships, on bringing people into the mission and actually showing up together, not just talking about it in secret and then individually doing it. That's what the ecclesia is. If we actually think of the ecclesia as the body of Christ, in the formality of a body, right? You're the pinky, I'm the knee, you're the ear, I'm the hip, whatever that looks like. I can't show up as a whole entity if I'm just showing up as a pinky. I'd be like, where's the rest of Virgil?
Right.
I need
Right.
all of him in the room. And
Yeah.
so inviting people into collaboration, but the important part of this is not to use to serve one another. Remember, we're serving others, but is to find out and go deep with those people. What are your gifts and talents? What is in your hand? This is a question I love to ask people. What's in your hand as far as resources go? Because that's truly where full partnership and collaboration can come into play, when our open-handedness is how we serve, rather than our clenched fist of, I want to link arms with you, which is what most people say. I want to link arms with you, but if I'm linking arms, I'm literally doing it right now, like Red Rover, my hands are clenched. But that's not what servant stewardship is about. It's like, hey, here's what I have. Here's what I'm stewarding. What are you stewarding? Let's bring it to the table. Let's see if we can make a new kind of yummy meal and now go present it out to someone else. And so really to be eyes wide open and to go deep with people real quick, because you can do that, and understand that there is so much more out there. And when we work together as a body, rather than showing up as a solo leader, that you yourself have created your own name.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so important. I've experienced a little bit of that here in South Florida. We have a movement called Church United, and just getting the unity of pastors and churches as the capital C church, responding to situations and crises, and then also impacting by service in the community together, like coming with a united front and a united stand. It really does make a difference. And I think as leaders, if we want kingdom impact, it's very, very important to do so. This is great, Tamra. We could probably go on for another hour or two just talking whatever comes to our mind, leadership. But I want to make sure that people know how to connect with you. And also, if they're interested in some of the books that you've written, how can they reach you? How can they find you? How can they follow you?
Absolutely. So my name, Tamra Andress. I've got tamraandress.com. That's where I'm at on social media. I've got a YouTube channel. You can get all of my books either on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. So you can search me that way. And I love voice memo. If you don't know that I love the microphone by now, you can voice memo me and I will actually pray for you. So send me a DM, tell me what you're working through, tell me what you're walking it out, how much you love Jesus. I'd love to pray for you in any scenario. And it's me because it's my voice. So it can't be anybody else on my team. That's the way that I love to serve out of a gift and talent that I have. So I hope people actually take the next step and connect. And it's not about getting my books. It's about linking arms in the spirit realm. And that's something I love to do.
That's cool. You heard it, everybody. Tamra's books are on Amazon. Also, do you have a website, Tamra, if they want to go check out your website?
TamraAndress.com. And right. It'll lead you to my movement, which is, there's multiple, but fitandfaith.com is another place, fitandfaithmedia.com. So those who have messages and they want to see them turn into movement for the kingdom, that's what I love to do.
Love it, love it, love it. It's important to get good resources. Make sure you lean in, leaders. Maybe there's somebody you want to bless with one of these books, or even introducing them to Tamra and everything she does. I want to mention Tamra on AVAIL. We have our AVAIL Journal that comes out quarterly. You've been a contributor to the AVAIL Journal. I think it's one of the best, if not the best, Christian content leadership. Beautiful yes. Magazines right now. We believe in resourcing leaders. Do you agree that the AVAIL Journal is an awesome journal?
Yes, and if they get the whole box, I mean, every time I get blessed by it. So 100% get on board with their membership. Yeah,
it's special. AVAILjournal.com, everybody. You can subscribe. You can try a free trial subscription. Go to AVAILjournal.com. We want to bless you in that way. Tamra, what's a final thought or a word of encouragement? What do you want to leave us with?
Check your posture. Check your posture. See where you're at. If you aren't capable of getting to that knee experience as a leader that you are, and you feel like you have to be the strong one all the time, I would encourage you to get on your knees before you get knocked to your knees, because that's where I was, and it was not fun. So I get on my knees regularly so that the Lord knows I'm available.
Get on your knees. Check your posture. Hashtag Tamra Andress. Drop the mic. I like it, Tamra. On behalf of our AVAIL team, on behalf of Dr. Sam Chand, Martijn van Tilborg, everybody who's behind the scenes here at AVAIL, we want to say we're proud of you, Tamra. We honor you and we bless you. We ask the Lord to continue opening doors for all that he's doing through you. You are a blessing. Hey everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us once again on the AVAIL Podcast. For more leadership resources, check us out at theartofleadership.com. Make sure to claim your free trial subscription of the AVAIL Journal by going to availjournal.com. As always, I'm your AVAIL Podcast host, Virgil Sierra. Muchas gracias. Thank you for connecting with us to learn the art of leadership here at the AVAIL Podcast.